There is an endless amount of information out there about the Pokemon world, and I bet that you're like me. You like to hear a Pokemon fact that you haven't heard before, or you like to hear something so interesting you can't help but go, huh, that's pretty cool. So today, I have compiled a list of 10 Pokemon facts, 10 little pieces of Pokemon trivia that made me go, huh, that's pretty cool, and I hope you react the same way. Pokemon Home was released in the year 2020, and since its inception there have been a few gifts that were in the initial release but then were later removed, like these 5 different Pikachu animations that were straight from the Generation 7 games. These were all removed in version 1.0.3, but there's one animation that was much more strange. This is apparently a gif of a woman dressed as Vocaloid Miko doing a dance and accidentally bumping into Vocaloid Rin. Now, Vocaloid is a singing voice synthesizer program, or one where you can input lyrics and melody and the program will produce something like this. But what in the world is this doing in Pokemon Home? Well, this GIF was originally posted on Twitter by a user called Arak2, and we can tell by the file name within Pokemon Home that this GIF was directly downloaded from Twitter using an external program and then input into Pokemon Home. It was most likely to test out GIF files and then was simply forgotten about and never deleted before the release of Home. Of course, it didn't last long and was quickly removed from the files in version 1.0.2, but that's pretty cool. Imagine if the Pokemon Company wanted to create a Pokemon based on you, using your appearance, personality, and even your name to inspire a brand new Pokemon. What an honor that would be, right? Well, what if the Pokemon was Snorlax? It is true that one of the largest Pokemon to ever be created was inspired by none other than Koji Nishino. For those who don't know, Koji Nishino has been working with Game Freak since the original Pokemon Red and Green in 1996 and has worked on nearly every Pokemon game, including, more recently, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It may be insulting to have such a large Pokemon inspired by you, but Koji has said that Snorlax is like a child to him, so I don't think he minds too much. Ken Sugimori, the art director for Game Freak, has confirmed a number of reasons why Snorlax was based on Koji Nishino. Firstly, his huge appearance, which sounds pretty drastic. To me, he just looks kinda cuddly. And apparently he's abnormally fussy about cute things. Secondly, Snorlax's Japanese name is Kabugon, and this is based on Koji Nishino's nickname, which is Kirby. Yep, that pink little guy who's known to devour everything. Now, we got the nickname Kirby because he too would eat everything. Apparently, even if it was moldy. We can also use some early Gen 1 concept art to see a Pokemon called Kabin, which looks to have more of a humanoid face and was later changed to be Snorlax. Huh, that's pretty cool. The Cherish Ball is a very special type of Pokeball that is often used to distribute event Pokemon. It was introduced in Generation 4 and before then, event Pokemon would be in a regular Pokeball. For example, if you went to the World Hobby Fair in late 2006 to early 2007 and purchased the DVD of Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea, the DVD included a special coupon which could be redeemed to obtain Manaphy in a Pokeball. But after this Manaphy, the Cherish Ball was introduced to signify that Pokemon in that ball were a special event Pokemon. Now, the very first Pokemon to be distributed in a Cherish Ball was from the Pokemon Center Stories in Japan in early February 2007, and was to promote Pokemon Sunday, a Pokemon television show. The chosen Pokemon for this event was Tropius. The original trainer name for this Tropius is Shokotan, who was one of the hosts of the Pokemon Sunday show. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl also made reference to this first of its kind Pokemon, with one of its trainers using a Tropius that enters the battle from a Cherish Ball. Tropius was the first, hey? That's pretty cool. The cry of a Pokemon has been a staple to Pokemon games from the very beginning. We hear it when we first encounter the Pokemon and whenever it enters the battle. The detail to these cries have obviously been enhanced and more defined from the original 8-bit Game Boy games. But it's always nice to hear the new Pokemon cry for the first time ever. Now, the longest Pokemon cry since the beginning was always Jinx, at an astounding 2.24 seconds. And to me, this cry has always been iconic, but it wasn't until Pokemon Scarlet and Violet this record would be completely crushed. With the introduction of Titan, the record for the longest cry has gone from 2.24 seconds to an astounding 4.007 seconds. It really sounds like it's coming from the depths of the oceans, and it is a very eerie and disturbing cry, especially because it drags on for so long. For reference, the shortest cry has been unchanged from Generation 1, with Pidgey having a cry of just 0.181 seconds. Huh, that's pretty cool. I spoke earlier about having a Pokemon that could be inspired by you, and that can be pretty hit or miss, but instead, what about having a trainer in a game named after you? That's probably more of a safe bet, and in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, there were a number of trainers that made special mention to particular people. Firstly, at the end of the game, you can battle a Master Trainer for a particular Pokemon. The Pikachu Master Trainer is Las Ikue, based on Ikue Utani, the voice actor for Pikachu since the very beginning of the anime. The name of the Eevee Master is Las Aoi, based on Aoi Yuki, the voice actor for Eevee in Let's Go. The Master Trainer for Zubat is Scientist West, likely to be named after Adam West, who has played Batman in the TV show in the 1960s. This theory is further enhanced by the Golbat Master Trainer, Scientist Keaton, based on Michael Keaton, who was Batman in later iterations of the franchise. It makes sense to have Batman being the master of the Bat Pokemon. Lastly, the Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar Master Trainers are called Psychic Aaron, Danny, and Ross. This is a reference to Game Grumps, which I think is really neat, and Ross posted on Instagram and said that Gengar is his second favourite Pokemon, and that this little Easter egg is so cool. So I think it's pretty safe to say that this made him go, huh, that's pretty cool. Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver are some of the most popular Pokemon games in the entire franchise, and personally, playing Pokemon Silver as a kid is one of my fondest memories, and remains my favourite Pokemon game to this day. It's hard to believe that originally, Pokemon Gold and Silver were planned to be the last Pokemon games. Spoiler alert coming, but it makes sense. After you defeat the Elite Four and the Champion of Johto, you go back to rediscover Kanto all over again and face those gym leaders after they've become more experienced. But the final battle against Red in the depths of Mount Silver makes a really satisfying conclusion to the series. Of course, we know that Pokemon's popularity exploded by this point, and they continued to make more games and more Pokemon, but I can only imagine what things would be like if this was the end. That would be pretty not cool. In the real world, all animals have their common name and a scientific name, which may include their genus, species, and sometimes their subspecies too. For example, the grizzly bear is the common name and its scientific name is Ursus arctos horribilis. It allows us to identify differences in species of animals. It would make sense that something like this would occur in Pokemon too, but in over 1,000 Pokemon, only 2 have a scientific name. Oddish has a scientific name that can be found in the Pokédex for both Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Y. It says, its scientific name is Odium Wanderus. At night, it is said to walk nearly 1,000 feet on its 2 roots. Personally, I think this Pokédex entry is pretty cool and could easily form the structure of a lot of Pokédex entries, but for some reason, only Oddish has a Pokédex entry like this. The second Pokemon with a scientific name is Kabutops, but it is not in the Pokédex. It is found in a specific episode of the Pokemon anime called Fossil Fools. In this episode, the gang head to the ruins of Elf, an area full of fossil Pokemon.
They're gigantic.
This is what a Kabutops maximus looked like in its natural habitat about 1 million years ago.
Kabutops maximus roughly translates to mean the largest Kabuto face. I wish more Pokemon had scientific names, especially as I think it would make sense when looking at regional forms. But anyways, that's pretty cool. It's fun to find little glitches or imperfections in Pokemon games, like clipping through walls or walking through an area that you're not supposed to be in. In Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, there is something you can do that the game definitely did not intend, and that is to force crash the entire game. You may notice that scrolling up and down through the Pokédex can cause small bits of lag, and this disappears when you close out of the Pokédex, but this little bit of lag can accumulate. If you do not close down the Pokédex and continue to scroll up and down, after a really long time, this lag can build and build, and it can start to feel like you're playing Scarlet and Violet. Look how laggy this is! My game's like frozen, oh my god! If you push through and continue to scroll through the decks, despite the immense lag, eventually the game will completely lag out and crash. This will take about 10 days of scrolling, so I gotta admit that I didn't personally try this out myself, but I think it's pretty cool. If you are like me, then you feel an overwhelming amount of nostalgia when you see and hear the original opening sequence in Pokemon Red and Blue. The battle between Nidorino and Gengar is etched into all of our minds and is simply iconic. Now, when you begin the game and are introduced to Professor Oak, he shows you one of the Pokemon from the opening battle sequence, a Nidorino. But this Nidorino isn't quite right. The music stops and we hear the cry of the Nidorino. Except, this isn't the right cry. This is actually the cry of a Nidorina. After all this time, our core memories of playing Pokemon for the first time contained a mistake. Yeah, sorry for shattering that memory for you. Well, that's still pretty cool. The history of the Pokeball is an interesting one. This small product that has the ability to shrink a large Pokemon down to a small size undoubtedly uses amazing technology. We know that in Pokemon Legends Arceus, Pokeballs are stated as a new technology in Hisui. We also know that in Johto, Kurt can create different types of Pokeballs from apricorns using older methods. So we know that balls were originally created from apricot fruit. In more modern times, companies like Silphco mass-produce Pokeballs for the public. I wonder, when this technology was created, what was the very first caught Pokemon? There are a few real-world references that we can use for this. The Encyclopedia Pokemonica, the Pocket Monsters Encyclopedia, and the Pokemon Daisuku Club website all describe that the modern Pokeballs were developed in the year 1925 from the researcher Professor Westwood of Celadon University. He experimented this technology on a Primeape that was able to shrink down small enough to fit in the professor's glasses case. Now we know that Pokemon is short for pocket monsters, and if Primeape is the first Pokemon to be shrunk down to a pocket size, is the first Pokemon ever Primeape? Not who I would have expected. That's pretty cool. If any of the facts in this video make you think, that's pretty cool, then consider subscribing to the channel and let me know in the comments your favorite Pokemon fact. Thanks.